We are thinking about some international association. I know that it is desirable, but maybe I'm the only one who thinks that it's desirable, so I cannot make an association with myself. And after saying that if it is desirable, we have to see if it is feasible. If we do not have young people, I think it's not going to be feasible, because this is a project for 30 years and hardly people like me is going to live more than 10 or 15 years. So we need, the feasibility of the projects is young people. Okay?
So the rest of us can leave?
If it is not feasible, we will not, I mean, people like me would not waste the few years that they got in their life.
No, what should happen?
We're not going to waste it if it's not feasible.
What should happen is all of us old people should infect the younger people.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, because with no young people, the project is not feasible.
You know what I think is going to happen? We're beginning to see, I think what I used to call an academic meeting. What I mean by that is that, remember Monty Python's the Holy Grail. The first scene is this person coming in on a horse, clean. And one of the peasants says to the other peasant, "Here comes the king! The king!" The other peasant says, "Well, how do you know he's the king? He's the only one not covered in shit." Well, what this means is that we're in a world now where the United States, 50% of all the adult population cannot read past the 8th grade. That means, like for our website, everyone to the left of you can't read beyond the 8th grade. Do you have any clue what that means in this kind of technological age? Now, what I'm saying is that I think what's happening is that we've got where the world sound bites, people illness, that kind of thing. I think what's happening, we're going to have these little islands of excellence where you're going to find, you talk about the youth and stuff like that. Given our times, you're going to find these people kind of have that interest. You're going to find a very small group of individuals. You talk about technological haves and have not. I think we're facing the reality that one alternate we're looking at is that we're going to find these little islands of excellence, and the rest of them are going to be like Monty Python's Holy Grail. And so how do you appeal? It gets to the ethos. It gets to the ethos. What is valuable in life? You're going to find out what those people are. What is education really valuable? That's the key to this.
Yes, and we think that a lot of what we're going to say here, wrongly or not, I think it is part of the education, not necessarily part of the instruction, which was the topic of the last session. You see, can we go toward an integral, integrated, and integrative academy? Integral in the sense to relate the main activity of academy, which are research, education, and extension / problem solving / consulting. To relate them in a whole, that in such a way that we have an emergent properties and some synergies that we don't find them in each one alone as they are in the present. And integrity. The integrity of the academy. When I was teaching in my university, I thought that the lack of integrity was just our problem. Problem in my country, problem in Venezuela, problem in my university. Then suddenly I started thinking that it was a problem in Latin America. Then after talking that with many people from the state and out of the state, I found out that it's a kind of a generalized problem. The lack of academic integrity. Especially what we were talking now here about ethos, ethics, etc. Integrated in the sense of relating academic activity to its social environment, to its socio-economic environment. The relationship that the academy should have with the environment that is supporting the academy via taxes or whatever, grants or whatever. So, in my opinion, this is again an ethical problem to support all those people who are supporting us. I suppose, maybe that the university should produce not all the students, but should produce some entrepreneurs. They are being produced in spite of the academy. So they will be more produced in a better shape if it is the academy who got the objective. One of their objectives is to produce entrepreneurs that can transform the result of the research into probably technological innovation. And to relate cybernetically research consulting, we will see that in the diagram better than in that way. And then integrative, to integrate what we were talking about, the whole morning, the whole afternoon, to integrate the disciplines. To integrate discipline in order to integrate knowledge. Because knowledge should be more integrated than it is right now. Disciplines are okay, and it was proved that thanks to the discipline, science advanced. But the problem is that enough? Is that sufficient? Maybe it's sufficient for scientific advancement, but is it sufficient for economic advancement in the developing countries? There is no way developing countries can go ahead without integrating knowledge. What a country like Venezuela or like any Latin American country, what we can do with Einstein? What value Einstein or a person like Einstein have in a country like mine, when I am from? What we can do with Einstein? It's not going to help us to develop, to have some socio-economical development. So that could be applied also to other regions in the States. Poor regions, not that developed as other regions, you see. To some universities that are not as developed as Harvard or as Stanford, or, you see.
But, Najib, before you go on, could I add to your number 2 under integrative? And that is focus as much on finding questions as on finding answers.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, yes, you are completely right. To focus more on finding questions than on finding. I remember my advisor, PhD advisor, told me, if you got a good question, you got the half PhD done. And he was right. He was right. If you got the right question. So,
but it's also true just for problem solving.
For problem solving, for anything.
Problem, unless you know
Yeah.
what question it is.
That's right. Even to get married, you need a question. Do really I want to get married?
Why am I want to get married? Najib, can I ask you a question?
Why do I want to get married?
What is an entrepreneur?
So an entrepreneur is some person with psychological traits.
It's French for
that can allow him to face the uncertainty and to take risks in life in order to transform an invention into an innovation. An invention that I got in my head in a prototype and try to see how I can produce thousands of these things and then to market it and to sell it. This is a
And yes and no, you might be going into that territory. You know what I'm talking about, Brandon. Is that? Well,
it's not an innovation. You are not using to society.
No, you're talking about monetizing it. You don't have to monetize it.
Yeah.
Okay, but I didn't talk about money. I didn't talk about money.
Right.
You
Exactly.
have to sell it, even if it is not.
You're right.
You have to sell the idea. You have to sell the innovation.
And the value, but I think what the next step is this: is a value. How do you assess the value attributed to it? It's a.
Whatever is the value,
Right.
you need to convince someone to use it,
Right. The value. There we go.
even if the benefit is monetary or not.
Right.
If not, it is not an innovation.
Now, what you
It's
described
nothing
was
new that's
monetized.
being used, you see?
Yeah, now we're
It's
not-
an invention, but it's not an innovation.
Now, you
It's
described-
nothing new being used.
And so what I'm getting at is to be in many, many areas of society, psychology, and any other these things. Now, how to, and I like that wording you have, taking the risk and all this other stuff.
Okay,
Any area.
what's-
Chief, you got a question?
Yeah, please.
I have some problems here with this integration, the
Yeah.
page before. Because I think this is fine, what you're talking about, I can relate it to. My husband is an entrepreneur, so he stopped to do his PhD and made a product and sell it and sold it and had a big company. So I know how this works, but there is always the same problem in this field because he's an electronic engineer, so they have this possibility to make product about from their scientific work. But the problem is he came from I have to ask for help for Dr. Müller. Grundlagenforschung. Grundlagenforschung.
Basic research.
Basic research.
Okay. The problem is they have problems to get the financial funds or means to work on their.
Even in Austria,
Even in Austria, yeah.
it's
everywhere.
having problem to get, to get, for example, what is called venture capital.
It's not.
Because in the States there is a lot of venture capital in almost all banks.
Yes, but for basic research,
For basic research.
For people,
Okay.
but you're right when you say we have to sell it, we have to know how to sell it. That's communication. It's how to tell people this could be important, and even if it is not important, then it's important to know that it is not important.
Yeah.
So, but you have to research about it, and that's communication. But the problem is, I didn't, when you talked about integrated, I had the feeling that it should be a must for every field. So,
You said it should be,
Yeah,
but
no.
it is not yet.
Yeah, but what I want to say is it would be a pity if someone that cannot sell because psychologically he cannot sell, but it's a great mind, would not have a chance to work scientifically just because.
You are right.
Yeah.
This is why I'm trying to talk not about individuals,
Yeah.
but about organizations.
Okay.
Because an individual
Yeah.
might not
Yeah.
be efficient in everything
Yes, that's what.
that the organization needs.
But even in terms of the organization.
The academic organization needs that. You see what I
In
mean?
terms of the use of academic organizations, what we were saying this morning, I still think it's important. The also means not one organization, the organization of organizations, some group of people who are working on putting material into the granaries and the
Yes,
libraries.
yes,
and the-
yes,
Okay.
yes,
So-
you're right.
Okay.
I would say to that, all these people, all these organizations are necessary, but they are not sufficient in order to produce effectively innovation.
Yeah.
They need something different than themselves. You see? So, Integral Academy is, to integrate the three kind of main activity that has the academy. In the last 20 years, informing science has grown to a transdisciplinary science. And then Professor Grandon Gill, the first book I got from him was related to business. And then he applied informing science. He showed that in business, the three activities should be related. So I was reading the book, and every sentence of the book applied to engineering from where I am. So I started talking with him. And we tried since then to generalize the idea that what he said in his book is not applicable just to business schools, but to engineering and to other professional schools, like law, like medicine, etc., etc., etc. I really recommend his first book. And that doesn't mean I'm not recommending the others. I already got 4 of them. But I recommend the first book in the context of this conversational session because it's based on his book. And his book is based in a new transdiscipline called Informing Sciences. So I proposed to him and to Eli not to talk just about informing science, but also about informing engineering. Because if we can differentiate between science and engineering, we would have done the first step of relating them cybernetically. In order to relate two things, first step, you have to differentiate these two things, at least conceptually, to know what you are relating.
Isn't that basically when you're talking about science and engineering, getting back to this point about what science is not? What science is not basically is technique. And what technique is not, what gives rise to it.
That depends on the concept of science. I am more inclined to work and to elaborate your concept of expanding science. I wrote about 70, 60 pages about your idea, just providing some details about what you've been doing. And I found out that in your expansion, and here a lot of people are not going to agree with me, but I'm not going to make any discussion because it would be endless. Okay? I arrived at the idea that if we expand science as the way I understood he's trying to do it, maybe I'm wrong, you can get as part of science theology. As theology was part of philosophy. Because a lot of things are being written based on science in order to prove that God exists or to prove that God does not exist or to prove hey, science is not proving the non-existence of God. So you have three kinds of people that are using science to prove God, to disprove God, or to say science up to the present does not disprove God. So what they are doing, these people, is not theology based on science. So theology could be part of science, understanding by science the expansion that you are proposing for science. You see, you can extend it more and more and arrive to that kind of situation which is completely, in my opinion, beneficial to society. Here, this is something that is happening. This diagram is trying to describe what it is happening. So, why I'm presenting it? Because it's happening in an implicit way, in an indirect way. So if we take all these arrows that are happening in an implicit and indirect way, if we make them explicit, so explicit as to plan how to do them and start doing that, we will achieve this synergy between research and scientific research and industry, business and society. We can do it more efficient and more effective, both things at the same time. So I'm not saying nothing new here. This is what's happening right now, but not in an explicit way that you can plan it. Relating academy to consulting. Many academicians, I had this experience in my country, in Latin America, and here in the States. I didn't have this experience in Europe, so I don't know, or in Asia, okay? But direct experience. Hey, he's a consultant. like making consulting diminish your academic category. He's making consulting. So it's a value system that should be changed, and this is not easy to change a value system. It's not easy to change it. But the reality is, again here, this is happening right now in most universities. But again, it's happening in an implicit, indirect way, with some mediating forces. The proposal is to make it explicit. In the Simón Bolívar University, we made it explicit through an organization. And this is the only thing left after the destruction of the last 15 years. So it's still providing the university with the maximum percentage of money produced by the same university, not by the government or by the students. And percentage is still the university that are most producing this kind of money to the university, even after the 15 years of destruction of jobs. This is one of the things that we did in Venezuela that was not destroyed yet. Okay, so it's working. And there is several things that we think that are essential. Is that the authority of this organization are not the authority of the university, as it is in the state. The authority of the organization linking the university with the business community should be different to the authority of the university, because the know-how is completely different. Because it's a business to relate business with the university. So academics would not would not do a good job for that. I mean, in the 1971, I read a book about the psychology of programming. And what was, even in the 71, identified is that a programmer is very good. The better he is, programming, the worse he is in social intelligence. Why? The answer of Winder is he's spending 10 hours talking with the computer. So while he is, developing his programming capacity, he's atrophying his social communication capacities. When I read that, with regard to the programmer, I said, that's me, as academician. Because academic people, they develop, they work 10, 12 hours a day developing their intellect with books, with formulas, with experiments, with labs. They are atrophying the skills required for being a good businessman, which are basically psychological skills, not intellectual skills. So a good academic usually is a bad businessman.
I was just going to say, I'm not sure I agree with you what academics do. In my experience, most of them spend huge amounts of time picking debates with other members of a committee on issues that don't matter anymore.
Oh, okay.
You still could have some atrophy, but imagining that we spend 10 to 12 hours a day thinking great thoughts is that's really optimistic.
You're right on that. that the way I'm interpreting what you are saying, I interpreted that you are agreeing with me and not disagreeing. So this relationship you can find any kind of university, and you find that going on in spite of the promotional system, especially in Latin America, that the salary a professor cannot feed his kids or her kids with his salary. Then he has to make some consulting. Maybe in the States it's happening something similar, I don't know.
I want just to make a point in terms of kind of consulting and teaching good research and so on, etc. But sometimes it becomes a little bit tricky in the sense that sometimes students are left on their own or sacrificed, and a huge amount of time is dedicated to consulting under pretext of...
Yes, you're right. You're right on that.
So a kind of a system of boundaries.
You're right on that. But the way, this is what's going on. This is what I am suggesting. To involve the student in the consulting business and to pay them. And to involve them in consulting and in research. Because that's the way, one of the ways that you are not just providing the student instruction, but you are educating them for their life. I mean, what is education? Well, there's not a definition of education. But at least education should be done in a way that you prepare the student to the life that is expected. So if you want to prepare the student, you have to give him not just instruction, but how to use the instruction. How to use that in business, and how to use it in research. So some people would say, hey, students are not for research. They don't know what they're talking about. Because the student has what the professor does not. There's no way that the professor can have it, which is, they are young. Their mind is not structured yet. And this is a necessary condition for creativity. So the student might not have the experience of the professor, but they have in average, more creativity than the professor. So if you can combine the experience of the professor with the creativity of the student, because the more experienced you are, the less creative you are. Because experience is structure. Structure your mind, this is by definition is experience. So the more structured you are here, the less creative you are. But if you can combine the creativeness of the young people with the experience of the old professor, that would be huge.
To some extent, this is happening under the label of service learning, where an increasing number of courses are being offered by having students work either individually or as groups, solving problems in the community. It works very well in the field of management, but you can also use it in many other fields as well, where the students work with the client and the community. In the case of a foreign language, you could write a family history for a Spanish family, and that way you're working in the Spanish language. And so you're improving your knowledge of Spanish. In the field of management, it's very easy. You find a client, you help them solve some problem. It's free labor for the client. The students get inside the organization, learn how the organization is working, and then write up what they did using as many concepts from the class as possible. And that mode of instruction, mode of learning, is spreading around the world under the label of service learning.
Service learning. We got Suzanne, that she usually comes to the March conference. She's doing exactly that in chemistry. Her students are making research in chemistry, and they're finding a new combination in chemistry that she is finding clients for that. So she's already doing that, but this is 1 person, 2 person, 10 person. Can you imagine if we have young ambassador, missionaries, intellectual missionaries trying to get all this idea in their universities or in their country, you see. What you're saying, but you just say it now. Because this is why I'm saying that this is going on. This is nothing new. That is going on indirectly, implicitly. If you make it explicit, then you can support education. You see what I mean? If you make that explicit, then you can support education. To make it explicit, you need to use some promotional criteria in order to provide incentive to the professor to work on that. But if you do that, you have the support for education, and then that would be a way to relate, to integrate the 3 basic functions of higher education. Higher education. That way, it will be more education than instruction, mere instruction. You need a lot more for an education like ethics, etc., you see? But this way of educating higher education people, university person, has more education than just instruction. I'm not talking against instruction, huh? Instruction is a necessary condition. What I'm trying to say is not sufficient for education.
This was for a previous, what about the students? Should they be involved in the research and consultation? I've seen places where they are. How do you see this?
Okay, I think they should be involved. In my field, information engineering, I involve them. And I know that they can get involved. And I know that they do works better than any professional. By experience, 30 years of experience. But I cannot generalize information system to all the other area. But I have the example of that lady that is working in chemistry. And she's doing it, even in chemistry. So I suppose it's a hypothesis that could work in most fields. But I cannot,
By the way, this answers maybe some of the questions we had earlier. I know one place, like in mathematics, they have a journal of undergraduate research. And the people involved in it are happy now that they have articles published there that cite previous articles. And I know one place in Williamstown, they solved the famous conjecture, the bubble conjecture, and they did it with the students and everything else. So this might be something for Stuart, if you want a way to foster these things, get the students involved and have journals dedicated to them.
That's a good idea. I know there's a lot of encouragement of
In mathematics,
undergraduate research.
you can look up the Journal of Undergraduate Math Research.
There are three models that I see here coming out. I know Mexico.
One name, I'll give it to you.
In Mexico, they require a social service component for all graduates. So if you are enrolled, whatever discipline it is, but you then are assigned to a agency, whatever, and you work as part of your degree requirement. That's in a social service capacity. The second model I see is the internship you like to have in this country. So you have the psychological intern, you're farmed out to humans or whatever, and you try to make that part of the degree program. The third thing is where you have the services provided internal to that department. For example, the Midwestern Eye Institute, College for Eye, whatever, work. And so if somebody comes in from the outside to the school, and they get whatever needs to be done by that school, internal. So I see those are the three models I could think of.
Yeah, but they are not working. In my opinion, they are not working. These models are not working. Internship is not working. I thought that it was not working in our universities. I found out that it's not working here. With my kids, he has an internship, he's getting bored, he doesn't know what to do, he doesn't know what to do. I mean, I'm leaving it. It's not working. Because an internship, they can promise you something and give you another word. So internship in Venezuela, in order to avoid a lot of things, people doing nothing, they had supervisors, a professor supervising the internship. But the professor ended up supervising the kid, not the boss. So the boss is exploiting the kid. He's making his internship in software engineering, but he's sweeping the floors. And this is not a metaphor. There is at least one case I knew that his internship included sweeping the floor, and he was in the last year of software engineering.
But then the boss has
It's
to
not
be
working.
educated. The problem is the bosses are not educated enough. Yes.
So the way to relate them is via consulting. Someone has to pay. Because if you don't do your work, they would not pay you, they will sue you. So there should be some responsibility. And consulting is a contract signed by the professor or signed by the university. So there is responsibility. So with this contract, you can employ your students and pay them, as they do in many legal education. You can pay them, why not? So you can subcontract with them the contract that you have in consulting or in development. So to do that, you should make it explicit, because it's being done, but not massively, not explicitly, not something that you can plan, you see. So if you do that, I cannot imagine why you cannot have all these outputs. System development, because we usually say research and development. Oh, research and development. So how do you do the development if you don't make an implicit consulting? So the development, the research, to end up in development of some product, you have to make explicit or an implicit consulting. Because if you don't consult your client, how are you going to be sure that what you are doing, there is someone who is interested in that, you see? So it's not the other way around. It's not development, then let me consult, which is okay. After the development, there is also consulting with something that is working, you see? But the development was also produced by consulting. System development. We did that even in a bad environment like the Venezuela. We did this 120 projects during 30 years. Most of them were used for at least between 5 and 10 years by the client. So we know that it could be done because we did it in information system. So I'm not sure if we can generalize. Innovations. How you can get an innovation without the labor of marketing, of seeing what the user wants. And if you want to see what the user wants, you have to consult him or her or not. So there is an implicit consulting.
No, this part must be done by professor. You cannot expect students to do it.
Okay, that should be done by professor. But the professor can take the students with him, like they are doing with my daughter, take him to the meetings. You see what I mean? And then after the meeting, you can try to fish in his or her creativity. So why not taking your student to the meeting? I mean, why not? And asking him, hey, if you got a question, pass it in a small paper and don't say it, because maybe it's a stupid question. You see what I mean? Entrepreneurship. In our university, we tried to do that, and we failed 100%. 100%. The failure. We failed because the president of the university, who was the one who liked the idea, lost the election in the next election. So we got the scientist, not the scientist, in Spanish we say cientificistas, scientificist, which is different to scientist. Someone that trying to reduce everything to science, you see? Engineering to science, business to science. So he's not a scientist, he's a kind of scientificist, you see? Because he tried to reduce all things to science. But we failed. Because not the university, not him. We failed to sell the idea to this kind of person. The one before him was engineer. So the selling was easy. The second one was not an engineer who couldn't sell it. We failed.
Sorry. I think the point that you just raised is very important in the sense that in most cases in universities, talking in terms of management, be academics or non-academics, or administrative people and so on, we have meetings, we operate as if we were in secret society. Why are we afraid actually to associate some of the student representatives, one or two for instance, in our strategic meeting? To me, it's becoming like we are ambassadors of students, while our students should be our ambassador.
Or both things at the same time. Reciprocally, you see?
So it becomes
a
tricky aspect. We are just preaching to ourselves. In our meetings, you will see that they are only old cows. So the same people are still doing the same thing. And then we are not associating the young blood and all those kind of things. Who are the future in terms of education, in terms of innovation, and so on. So we need as well to have a kind of paradigm shift. And there are so many things actually which are happening. We consider that we are operating in this kind of secret, and then we come with a piece of information, then we convey to students about a given strategy and all those kind of things, and the rest we put under carpet. So I think we need to, maybe we are trying to hide something, or we are in fear of something. This question mark. So we need to.
Yeah, and I will go further. And many of you is gonna laugh at me. Not with me, but at me.
We become academics.
Why don't do that also with high school students? Why not? Why not?
By the way, Najib,
Why not?
I just attended the actuarial training conference, and someone got up, and that was his session. For the past 20 years, he and another school, the other school had 19 years, so they beat it. This is to get people interested in being an actuary. So they take students from disadvantaged high schools during the summer, and they expose them, they do problems together and everything else. And he reported the statistics, once the students...
In the actuary field?
Yes, which
Gosh.
is it's worse than engineering. And once they're exposed to this, they're no longer afraid of it. They say, this is something I can do. And he went on to report the statistics. The lecture is online. I can give it to you.
Please, yes.
I'll be happy
Yes.
to give it to you.
I'm going to see it and distribute it.
Yeah, and there's a contact there.
Yeah, because why not? I mean, why not? Maitri, they're working in software development with university students. They are also planning to work with high school students. Why not? Why not? And it's a huge corporation. Why not? So the industry is doing that, but the academy, we don't do it. Because we feel like we are superior. Why not?
I have a question because I have this experience in a small university, small faculty. And we had 2 students working first time there. And the problem we had, I don't know if this is the idea, but the problem we had is that they got every information that should not come to the students yet because we are unsure, because we had to check it still, because we don't know if this accreditation will be done next month. So and a lot of things that make the students anxious, afraid, and that make a lot of problems. We later on we said, better some of the topics we should talk without.
You know what? From what I understood, I wouldn't agree with that because anxiety is part of life. So it's part of the education of any student to teach him or her to deal with anxiety because this is part of life. So this is part of the education because education is to prepare the kids for life. Anxiety and stress is part of life. So why not?
Yeah, we had the problem we couldn't deal with that because it was maybe because it was a surprise for us.
Maybe okay, I'm gonna be sarcastic, okay? It's okay? Maybe it was easier the other way.
Sure, because we knew the other way.
Well, not sarcastic, cynical.
We didn't change it. It's
Yeah.
still we did almost the same, but it was a very difficult situation sometimes.
Yes. I mean, difficult situations are part of life.
Yeah.
If you are not educating the people to handle difficult situations over what we are doing in higher education.
But I think when you do this, it would be good for the staff people, for the administration, for the professors, everybody, to have maybe a consultant or someone that helps people to implement such a system, because you have to be prepared for that. Because then it gets not positive. it gets
Yes.
a negative spiral.
Yes, I agree completely with that.
So it would, the people, when you implement something like that, you should first inform yourself, it may be some consultants and advice, because it's not so easy.
Yeah, you're right. Painful situations should be anticipated, even to the client. For example, information system, tailored information system. When you start with the system, 1 year is beta test, and it's painful for the users and for the computer people. It's extremely painful. So what we used to have is seminars to remove them from their work and take them to some hotel or something like this, to tell them, to the user, hey, it's gonna hurt. It's natural. It's gonna hurt. And the metaphor we used during these 4 hours was the woman that is pregnant and is gonna give birth. That's gonna hurt. So let me prepare you. Because they are giving birth to the system. And this is hurting process. So you have to prepare them. So if you prepare users that are 30 or 35 years old, the more reason you have to prepare a student. Hey, that's gonna hurt. The discipline that produced it, yes or no? Knowledge engineering is working with the form of the knowledge, not with the content. When you work with the form of the knowledge and you relate forms, not the content, you can relate the disciplines. So why we cannot do in the university what is being already done in business? Why we cannot make knowledge engineering in USF? In your department? Why not? I mean, why? Why you cannot do in your department, in your school?
Why can't we do it in government?
He is the academic director of the doctorate in his university for executive, okay? So I'm challenging him now. Why don't you do it? Knowledge integration, knowledge engineering in your doctorate, in all the discipline related to your doctorate. Why not? Even small business are doing integration of knowledge or not. Why we are not doing that in our universities?
Well,
Why?
Well, Chief, in all fairness, we won't even allow a course with a functional name in our program. Everything has to be interdisciplinary. We won't tolerate a course with management, finance, information systems, or marketing.
No.
Okay?
This is because I know that I'm challenging you. Why you don't make an knowledge engineering in your department? And you integrate the knowledge that you have not just in your mind, but in the mind of the other professors. So if this is being done not very successfully, if that's being done in business, why we cannot do it in the university? If the university are supposed to be producing the knowledge that the business is using. Really? I mean, is there anything that I'm not seeing? Am I wrong in something? I mean, business is using the knowledge produced in the university. You agree with that? So why they can integrate this knowledge and not the university cannot integrate the knowledge? Why?
Because the criteria of success are different.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it.
Which what knowledge is.
That's it. And the criteria are subjectives and are. Someone said, I don't remember the author now. I'm not sure if it is the president of Harvard or the president of
Some of it
of Arizona. So I'm reading both books at the same time, you see. So I don't know who said that. He said the only institution that it's so difficult to change as formal religion and as the law is the academy. You cannot change the law because the law, by definition, they are based in jurisprudence, what has been done before, so you cannot change what has been done in the past. You see? So it's static, you cannot change it. Religion is static, it's the formal religion. So he comparing the religion and the legal system to academy. There is no way to change it. Why? There is some criteria why people would not start changing this criteria. Because they're benefiting from the criteria. Okay, that's a good answer. Because their power depends on this criteria. This is another answer. And if that's the answer, then it's a moment to make a revolution in academy. And that could be done by the young people to change things and to have a different criteria than the criteria we have right now.
What I find interesting is that criteria have really been defined by places like U.S. News and World Report and The Economist, because they're rating universities. The universities are trying to rise in the rating, and the rating says you have to publish within your discipline. And the universities have bought into it, because if they can rise in the ratings and they get more students and they get more money, so faculty, it's very odd to me that the universities are allowing these publications to set the scorecard.
There's another aspect.
And that's the thing that is unbelievable. I never could understand that. I mean, the whole university of the whole world are depending on something that was bought by Reuters Thomson. Started as a good idea when it was ISI. But in the 2005, that was bought by Reuters Thomson. And then if you are not indexed in something in Reuters Thomson, hey, you better think about some different job than academy. So this huge corporation who knows nothing about academy are imposing the criteria on the academic promotion.
There is something else, though. I mean, one of the points is you act like on the mathematics. I want to publish papers in education, psychology, linguistics, whatever I do. And the thing that's stopping me is no one recognizes me. There's something else that's stopping me. The experts in these fields who are referring my paper might say you don't know enough. They might have an unfriendly attitude instead of an inviting attitude. Instead of saying, this is a wonderful idea, here are some co-authors who will publish with you, and I know a person in mathematics who wrote a paper, the referee said, they ended up writing a joint paper. But the point is, it's not just the institutions, it's beyond that. It's that to write a paper in another field, you have to be judged by the people in that field, even if your dean would accept it, and that's hard. So if I'm going to publish 10 papers in mathematics and get 6 published, I might submit 10 papers in some other field and get 1 published. It's not worth it for me, and we have to create a system where people with good ideas, instead of saying it's a great idea, I'll write a paper, say I'll write a paper with you.
So it's a matter of criteria, as he said. It's a matter of criteria. How do you change this criteria in academy?
Yeah, but the criteria is not just at the presidential and dean level. It's at
yes.
the level of the referees and the whole structure.
And not just the referee, I mean the superstructure, which is the people who are publishing and the publisher. I mean, everyone still believing in the publisher that published 120 junk paper produced by random generator.
The International Journal of Junk.
Okay, it was 120 papers published by them, and they are still the reference of good publication. Come on, come on. 120 papers published, and some of them for 2-3 years they did remove it back after. And they're still the reference point.
I think we have to be very, very careful blaming outside agencies for effectively our own shooting ourselves in the foot. Things like these rankings, when you actually look at how they're computed, the amount of credit that's impacted by papers is very, very small. They use all sorts of other metrics which they can gather more accurately, even though as faculty members we're constantly being told, oh, the papers have a big impact. They don't. This is something I've spent a lot of time studying. However, from the faculty member's point of view, it is nice to have the perspective that the papers are very important, because there is nothing that will influence a faculty member's market value more than publishing in top-tier journals. And as a consequence, we are claimed to be forced into doing this by a system that rewards us for doing it. So we're being forced to do something that is actually in our own best economic interest. And under those circumstances, my own sense is that we're the ones to blame for this, not these outside agencies.
They are taking advantage of our weaknesses.
Well, no, they're not taking advantage of our weaknesses. They're giving us what we want. They're telling us to do exactly those things that will increase our market value the most. And so we've set up the system, and there are often complaints about administrators, but the vast majority of administrators that I have met are formal faculty members and think like faculty members. And the real problem that I see here is that you're saying the young people have to change the system. But if those young people get a doctorate, for 4 or 5 years, they are going to be trained to follow a specific set of rules. Then they will go on to a university where, in order to get tenure for the next 6 or 7 years, they will be expected to follow a specific pattern of rules. It is the very rare individual who, after having experienced 10 to 12 years of training and being required to follow a specific set of rules, it's a very rare individual who can then step outside of those rules and say, okay, well, now that I've got tenure, I'm going to use it and be radical.
That's the next step. Then they behave so well for 13 years, they say you're a model professor.
Right.
You put them on the P&T panels, and they are forced to say, well, these are the standards by which I was judged, and these are the standards.
So we are back to what Jeremy said. Where is the ethics of what we are doing? We know that we are doing the things like in the way that should not be done. We know that we are doing harm to the students. We know that we are doing harm to the society. We know that we can do it better. We know that, but we are not doing anything. So is there ethical problem? I'm not going to make an affirmation, but an interrogation. Is there an ethical problem that is permeating the whole academy and the whole world?
Let me add something to what Brandon said. Very good point. There's been research done on how do you do breakthrough research. Well, breakthrough research is sort of game-changing research that is very widely cited over a period of time. And almost invariably, the first criterion that says is multidisciplinary research. And there's a whole set of criteria or standards that are defined. Hollingsworth and Carl Miller has done some of this research. And yet, that's not what we reward in the university, whether it's the faculty or the administration or the ratings agencies or whatever. The multidisciplinary research is what produces the really big changes, but we don't emphasize that, even though our research says that that's the kind of research that's the most important.
Well, we will always ignore the findings of our own research when they are inconvenient for us, which is just the same phenomena that we experience when practice ignores our research findings. And we say, oh, practice, bad practice. We have evidence-based research that tells us this and this. But yet most of us teach classes, and very, very few of us actually have looked systematically at the education research in our area to figure out what we could do more effectively. Not that that would be a gold mine, but nevertheless, we're very inclined to ignore research that tells us what we should be doing if it is inconsistent with what we want to be doing.
Okay, I'm going to ask again the question, is that ethical?
No, it's not.
What we are doing?
It's
So how the hell can we call ourselves that we are working higher education if the most important thing of education, that is ethics, is not being followed by us? You see the problem, the contradiction, the mental contradiction that people like me are feeling day after day.
Well, it's
And especially when they are teaching your kids.
It's very frustrating, but the thing is, after people have been through that 12 years of indoctrination, their value system has been changed to the point where they don't view it as unethical. In fact, they view it with very positive terms, like rigor, when in fact, if you look at most of what we consider rigor, it's adherence to a procedure that does not necessarily produce any kind of useful results, but as long as we adhere to it strictly, we've achieved rigor.
I can accept that what happened probably to the most people in academy, that they are an ethical problem, but they are naive. They don't know that they are an ethical problem.
Yeah.
But my problem is not with these people that they are an ethical problem, but they don't have the conscience that they are an ethical problem because they don't know. My problem is with the professor that they already know that they are facing an ethical problem and they are doing nothing. And these people are teaching my kids.
But you see, when you raise this ethical problem, people flee the corridors. As one who knows.
And then we can talk about politicians that are not ethical. How about us?
This gets into your thing about responsibility now, Steve. A couple things. You get these people who, as part of the peer review process, they're part of the faulty process. There's another phenomenon that I look at barometers, and I like to look at history as well. And I don't know, and somebody might be able to tell me this, but I saw this stuff emerging about 10 years ago in a real bad way. And I don't know if it's always been there or simply a question of reportage and increased communications. And I started seeing two phenomena appearing. The amount of plagiarism seems to be a hell of a lot more. Now another thing is really bothering me, besides false degrees, certificates, things like this. I'm seeing all these, they call it, politely called open source journals. And I'm seeing a plethora of these things coming out now, of all this junk journals. So I'm seeing this whole atmosphere. It's not simply the old stuff of the old standards that don't work and all this other stuff. I'm seeing all these new, I don't know if they're new things or not, but I think they are. That the environment's becoming contaminated with all this stuff too.
But with what face we academicians are claiming these kind of things that are being done against the ethics if we are the first one going against the ethics? So we talk about the people doing such and such and such, but we don't talk about ourselves.
Let me ask you a question. The same thing that you were saying, but I put in a different words. As a question, I want to know the answer. Politicians are at least watched by journalists. Academic people are not watched by anybody outside of academia. Yeah. Do we have any hope for the system to be any better? Everybody knows politicians are corrupt and bad. Do we have any reason to believe that we as a community to be better?
Yes, you're right.
I think that
that's a good question.
Ultimately, the hope
I have no answer.
The hope is an excruciating process whereby the folks who supply the resources to academia which are the parents of students and the government, eventually become disillusioned with the product and start constricting the resources. Because once the resources start to get constricted, then all of a sudden...
But how do we know?
Then the problem is worsened.
What? Oh no, the problem, I mean, the problem will be worse in the short run, but when the resources are constricted, what will happen is we will have to start justifying our value in terms that actually make sense.
But you have to get to the gatekeepers. See, that's the thing. So you have to get to those gatekeepers and their ethos. And I think that's the key to the walk right there. The ones that, the one that pass on the standards, create the standards, and all this other stuff that you're just talking about. You got to get it done.
Well, the ones who are creating the standards, in a sense, right now are prolonging the process, so that every time there are attempts to reduce university budgets, for example, the accrediting agencies will come up with new standards, which essentially require the universities to hire more people or different types of people, so that essentially the accrediting agencies in the university context perform a role similar to the role performed by unions in a production system. They basically establish work rules, and they prevent the big bad administration from coming down on faculty.
Yeah.
But there is nothing, not even medicine has had its expenses rise as much as higher education in the U.S. over the past 20 or 30 years. And yet, the perception is that the situation is getting worse. By the way, with respect to ethics, the Journal of Business Ethics recently, a couple of years ago, had to retract 5 articles because they were plagiarized. The Journal of Business Ethics.
But what worse, is this 5 articles because they plagiarized, or 120 published papers that are garbage coming out at random from a computer? Let me go to something worse than that you know already about that, and we talked about that, peer reviewing. The 92% of the largest society of scientists in the United States do not believe that peer reviewing is working as it is being applied. Just the 8% of the largest society of scientists in this country believe that peer reviewing is working. And we are still using in the academy peer reviewing. No one believes on that, but everyone to use it. So this is what I can call an academic totem. Has no use at all, but don't touch it. Don't touch it. It's an academic totem, don't touch it. But no one believes that this is working.
I guess
Is that not an ethical problem that we are in?
I think such things like this, they get the status as a symbol. So apparently nobody has a better idea, and they just keep this.
They are better idea, ask me.
But they don't believe in the better idea.
They don't care.
They don't care or don't believe, or they are.
Is there or is there not a better idea to make peer reviewing? Make it 2-tier, make it 3-tier.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why you still keeping doing peer reviewing with irresponsible people because they are anonymous? So how you can get a responsible person if his name is not going to be known?
It's always very difficult to change the system.
So no one is doing anything as long as I know. And we've been researching this area for a long time. No one is doing nothing. It's not that an ethical problem.
Yeah.
A huge one.
See, another thing, though, what really gets me, though. Yeah, go ahead, Brennan.
Well, I mean, what you're describing is the problem that exists with every paradigm. essentially, if you read Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolution, one of the most important lines in that book is there has never in the history of science been a paradigm that was replaced simply because it was bad. There always had to be a demonstrably better paradigm to replace it that developed a series of adherents.
Why we are not looking for this better paradigm?
Well, we're looking for it, but the problem, but I mean, you're looking for it in a sense. But the problem is that demonstrably better is extremely difficult in some fields, such as the social sciences. You take a look at economics, which has got the longest history of, it has always been considered the sort of king of the social sciences. And yet, if you ask an economist right now as to what should be done with the economy based on economic research, if you ask 50 economists, you get 51 different answers, all of them citing research and making arguments that it's logical. In a field like that, where you don't have any objective measures of quality, except over a very, very long term, it's going to be very, very hard for another paradigm.
So why we are fooling ourselves with the promoting people according to the journals, if the peer reviewing that is the base of the journal is not working? All of us, we are fooling ourselves.
We're not fooling ourselves, we're simply following a procedure. It doesn't necessarily mean the procedure makes sense, but that's what we mean when we talk about rigor. Adherence to a procedure. And whether or not the procedure makes sense is secondary to the fact that we're adhering to the procedure.
I mean, the rigor is to keep going in a wrong way.
You know what this is like? What you just said was very interesting. You know what this is like? It's almost like the Malleus Maleficarum. You have this, which is hammer. You have this book of ideology and crap, and you got to bring some poor bugger in, and you got to determine whether they're a witch or not by this stuff that doesn't even work, obviously. But you have an ideology. That's exactly. I don't see a hell of a lot of difference between what we're doing now and the Malleus Maleficarum. We're bringing a bunch of poor buggers in. We're going to find out if they're witches or not. In other words, you're doing bad, bad, bad. You can't publish in that journal. It's like Monty Python all over again. Who's a witch?
And oddly enough, I actually just wrote a section on that book, and what they also did was they also tortured people and asked them leading questions like, did you get naked on Brocken Mountain once a year and have Congress with the devil? And if you torture people enough, they will always say yes, eventually, and then once they've done that, it's proof the book must be right, because everyone confesses to the same thing.
And which floats? And which floats?
So, I mean, anyone would understand that human being is not perfect, okay? That the people who believe in God, they would say that God is perfect. Human being, we are not perfect, but we are different than the other animals in the sense that we are perfectible. So we are not perfect, but we can achieve a higher level of perfection. Can you tell me in the last 50 years, 60 or 70 years, which is the higher level of perfection with peer reviewing? So the academy is being managed by human beings or by machines? Can anyone tell me what we have done to make a little less imperfect the publishing business of the articles in the last 70 years? So what we are, the professor of the university, what we are we human beings or what? Or machines that cannot perfectionate themselves? What are we doing? Why we are fooling ourselves and fooling the others and fooling our kids and fooling our students and fooling our advisors and fooling our professors and fooling our colleagues? And then we scream when a politician is corrupt. How about the academic corruption? How about the academic corruption? Not the monetary corruption. corruption that you find in university. But in the concept, we're corrupting the concept. What's about the academic corruption that is almost everywhere? I thought that was in Venezuela 4 years ago. That it's almost everywhere. We are corrupting the concepts. The first example, the one of peer reviewing, the publishing industry. The publishing industry is an industry of $4 billion a year.
You know something? Now,
They are working with your work, and with her work, and with her work, and with the money of your government, and your government, and your government. They are doing nothing but to publish, and it's $1 billion a year of revenue. I'm not saying that. The one who's saying that is the president of the board, of publishing board of Harvard, and he was before that of Oxford and Stanford. I got the article of him if you want to read it. But no one cares about what he's saying. I'm caring. At least I'm screaming. But no one cares about the guy that has been for 35 years member of the publishing board of Harvard, of Stanford, and of Oxford. That's his words. No one cares about that. The professor, we don't want to hear that. Because that makes us feel bad, painful situation. So we don't want to listen to him, not even if he's from Harvard and Stanford, because what he's saying is painful to us. Why we don't face the problem? I know that we don't have the solution, but I'm trying to find it. I don't see if we are trying to find it. Maybe I'm wrong, everyone is trying, and I don't see it, but I don't see it, that we are trying to solve it. I would be happy if for 70 years we've been trying to solve it and we failed. Okay, we try, and we keep trying. But I don't see that we are trying, and this is the ethical problem, that we are not even trying.
a number of years ago, they discovered in digging around some of the medieval monasteries, poking around in the wells, they discovered a lot of bones. I forget what the hell is one. And these bones are kids. Now here are the monks, and that hierarchy, working in conjunction with the royals, they all have, we all know our history. You look down at the wells and see all these kids' bones. What's all this? Well, guess what? The monks are supposed to be celibate, right? Not likely. Because you look down the wells and you see these kids' bones. Well, where did the bones come from? What were the nuns doing? So we're finding out, we talk about, I think there are innate structures. What we're talking about are those monks knocking up those nuns and tossing the bones down the well. And I don't see any different, and then they're in cahoots with the royalty. So I don't see any real difference in the structure. We're talking about 1200 current common era, and we're talking about 2015. You tell me what the difference is.
We're not killing people.
It's the same structure.
We are supposed to be human beings, and we are supposed to be improving, and we are not.
Same shit, different day.
We're not killing
That's
people.
all.
We've improved. I'm depressed. I came here for 5.5 hours, and I'm walking away, and all I found out is that we're unethical.
No. Well, I didn't make any affirmation. I'm just making a question regarding, I'm asking, because I'm kind of naive. So I'm asking if it is ethical to have all these kind of problems and not to try to solve them. I'm trying to support the idea that an association oriented to this kind of problem, I think it is necessary to have. There is not a bunch of people that we can count on. Well, Christ had just 12 disciples. And look what he did. So, at least let us scream, which is what I was doing, scream. Because it's hurting me. It was hurting me with my students, because I told them, all my students, hey, you are not receiving education in this university. What you are receiving here is instruction, it's not higher education. So go, please go and tell your parents to give you the education that we are not giving you here. Because we are not giving you. I'm not gonna fool you. And now, I'm feeling the same thing that's happening to my kids. Not to my students, but to my kids. So it's something that it was hurting, 30 years ago with my students, and now it's hurting with my kids. They're receiving in the best university, in one of the 50 best of the state. One of them is receiving just instruction. And he's believing that he's having education. See, he doesn't listen to his father, because he's already having the education in the university. But what he's having is just education, instruction, and via e-learning. So you can imagine the whole career of some guy just with e-learning. E-learning is a wonderful thing as support for education, but not as substitute. As support. And this marvelous thing, after the kids had 25 years old, because the brain is developing biologically until 25 years old. So maybe the e-learning is good as academic extension, as for adult education, but not for kids. The kids are being educated, not just instructed. Can we educate them just with e-learning? And this is the disagreement we have in a past plenary. Can we educate kids 18, 19 years old just with e-learning? I love e-learning as a support of education, but not a substitute of education. Because education is something more than learning. It's something more than instruction. It's apprehending. That's the word of education. Apprehend. Apprehend the ethic. Apprehend the emotion. Apprehend the good way of behaving. And developing the skill to deal not with the exam of tomorrow, but to deal with life. Who's going to help the guy when he's going to take his decision to get married or not? Who's going to help him when he or she's going to educate their kids? Who's going to help them? Are they prepared? Are we preparing them for dealing with life? We are not doing that in the way they did that with me. With me, did a better job than what I was doing with my students. And this is sad for me. Not just hurtful, but sad. I received a better education than the education that I'm giving. I gave to my students for 35 years. I received a better education. Why? Because the system is oriented to efficiency, not to effectiveness. And I was forced to give all the curriculum, written curriculum. I didn't have time for anything else. Because they wanted me to give all that. Just instruction. So all the system is oriented to efficiency, which is not bad. because you cannot be inefficient. But you have to have a trade-off between effectiveness and efficiency. Because in dynamic systems and in certain environment, you gain efficiency just lowering the effectiveness, and you increase the effectiveness decreasing the efficiency. This is Ashby variety law. It's a law in dynamic system with uncertain environment. The only way to increase effectiveness is lowering the efficiency and vice versa. So you cannot maximize both of them at the same time in dynamic system and within certain environment. You need to make a trade-off, because if you maximize efficiency, you are minimizing the effectiveness of the education. So that's the way they are maximizing instruction, but they are minimizing the education. The instruction is the mean, one of the means to achieve education. So they are confusing, we are confusing the means with the ends. So the instruction, which is a good mean and necessary mean, is being transformed in an end in itself, instead of the education. So this is what we should do. Okay, I agree. Let me agree. But let's be honest. Let's call that higher instruction. Let's do it. But not fooling the parents of the kid that we are giving him or her higher education while we are giving higher instruction. So if we're not doing that, let's do it, but let's be honest.
There's one component of this, I think we have to internalize it, though. It's not simply, you can't point to them and say, you'll be educated. You've got to internalize it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Just like it's
Yes.
Althusser.
This is what I meant by apprehension.
Yeah, but you have to internalize it. You've got to be the education. You can't simply say, be educated. You've got to be the education.
Yeah.
You've got to be the process. And you as a system, when you talk about the systems analysis part of it, you then are the system. You're the one that's the internal, you're the educated, or I don't know how to, I can't think of the word right now, but you are the process. You are it. And so when you talk about those processes, the balancing between the efficiency and but when you internalize all those, the education versus the techne versus the systemic, you internalize it's the same thing, the same kind of structure. You are the system that is it. That's what goes on inside of you. So
Well,
that's the internalization.
Thank you for your time. I'm sorry we abused of your time. But we got, at least myself, I got emotional every time I am in this subject, because for 30 years, I've been telling my students, hey, we are not educated, you go say that to them, at least to be honest with them. So now it's with my kids. They are getting just instruction, not education. Instructional design.